viewers at home, and thank you once again for joining us on the show today. My name is Chef Andy, your host, and today we are going to be playing with some fish. I'm going to be showing you how to make a very simple dry fry from your very own kitchens, and I'm also going to be pairing this with some steamed rice and some mixed vegetables. But before we get that far, we'll proceed to introduce the ingredients before us. So from the very front, I've got a small handful of some fresh parsley. I've also got some paprika powder, about 3 cloves of garlic, and 1 knob of some peeled ginger root. You're also going to require about 6 pieces of cherry tomatoes, about 200 grams of some tilapia fillet, whole, of course, cleaned and scaled. You'll require also some broccoli, 1 piece of carrot, and 1 large courgette. You're also going to require some lemon there, and a bit of some red onion, some salt for seasoning, about a cup of basmati rice for cooking, some water to steam your rice in, and last but not least, some black peppercorns and some oil to put this whole dish together. But before we begin, we'll take a short break, allowing you to just stretch and unwind, and we'll see you after a short break. Hello viewers, and welcome back to this show. For this particular recipe, we're going to begin by frying our fish. So it's a very simple technique. I will begin firstly by unwrapping our tilapia fish. You can alternate this for any particular whole fish of your choice. Remember, there's quite a bit of fish to choose from here in this very city, so you should actually be able to get some very beautiful tips of whole fish you can try from your local fishmonger. So we're going to start this simple process by moving our fish onto our board, and we will begin to cut off the gill, making sure, of course, to always have a sharp knife for this process. Proceed to turn over and do the same thing on the other end. Once those are removed, we're going to begin to score the skin of our fish. By scoring, I mean basically making some very shallow incisions with a sharp knife on the sides of your fish. Remember, this particularly also allows for it to cook a little faster. Proceed to do the same thing on the other end. Simple as that. Now next up, proceed to season your fish. Very important to do so at this stage. So always begin by opening up the cavity of your fish and proceed to sprinkle some salt in there, using your hand to make sure to work the fish around the inside of the cavity, and proceed to do the same thing on the outside, making sure to rub some of your salt right over the sides as well, and also just pressing some of that salt right through those incisions you made earlier. And you can proceed to discard your plate and clean your hands very quickly. Now, something to mention as well, remember, very easy to contaminate your food, especially when working with fish. So always try and make sure, if you're going to be making fish or any particular meal that is acquired from the sea, be sure to get it fresh. Some very good signs of checking for your fish: always make sure it's got a nice beautiful firmness to it. Make sure the eyes are not completely sunken. They should actually bulge out, and they should actually give a nice beautiful bright color. And last but not least, the smell should actually be a little fishy. Remember, any particular smells that are particularly disturbing to you may be a particular good sign to know that your fish is not fresh, and it may not also be fit for human consumption. So off with our fish into the oil. Already we have some a pan that's got some hot oil in there. So I'll proceed to add my fish. And this you will allow to begin to cook until it's completely crispy on each side. Of course, always giving it a bit of time to do so. And while that continues, I'll just proceed to turn over my board. And now, very, very simply, we're going to begin by steaming off our vegetables very, very quickly. But before we do so, we're going to start by chopping them up on the board. So with a sharp knife, proceed to slice your carrot into about 1/2 inch chunks, slicing diagonally. And place those to the side. Proceed also to just take the edges off your courgette and begin once more by slicing 1/2 inch chunks. You can proceed to reserve the rest and proceed to move those to the side. Once that's done, proceed to also grab your broccoli and begin to deflour this by taking off the rosettes very, very gently with a knife. Of course, always cutting as far as you can from the stem. That should be about enough. You can also reserve the rest. Now for your vegetables, a very, very simple tip, especially if you're going to be making mixed vegetables, you may actually want to steam them very, very briefly before finishing them off on a pan. So we're going to start by reheating a pot of water on the side. Now for this, you're going to just steam them very, very shortly. And for that, you will require the aid of a strainer. So this particularly assists in allowing just the steam to come through, but it also allows for you to cook the vegetables without actually incorporating them with any of your liquid. So firstly, begin by seasoning your water. And now, very, very simply, using your strainer, proceed to place that right over the top and allow your water to come to the boil. Once your water starts to steam up, we will also continue to steam our vegetables. So we're going to leave those on the side. And now we are also very quickly going to steam up some rice. So very, very simply, proceed to add your rice to a pot, making sure not to waste any of your rice. Proceed also to add your liquid, making sure to add about double the liquid to the portion of rice. Simple, very simply by adding some salt. And of course, last but not least, for a nice, beautiful garlicky finish, just proceed to pat down one of your garlic cloves, and you can throw that into your pot. And now proceed to move this to the heat. That should take anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes to fully cook, especially for a portion that size. While that continues, very simply, we're going to proceed to turn over our fish. So very important to move it around the pan first to make sure it's not stuck to the pan, and proceed to very gently turn it over. That should also cook up in about the same exact time as you did for the first side. Of course, always making sure to get a nice even color to your fish. And also very important to remember, your fish will take quite a bit of time to cook through. So you may actually want to fry the first process. And if you actually also have a hot oven ready, you can also proceed to throw that into the oven, especially for chunks or pieces above a kilo in size. But for anything below 500 grams, this should be able to easily fry on your pan. You may of course have to turn it a few times to make sure that it's actually dried through, right through to the end. So while that continues, we're also now going to pay our attention to the other side of the pot. So very, very simply, as soon as your water comes to the boil, proceed to move your vegetables into your strainer. And now we're just going to allow that to continue cooking, allow them to steam off until the carrots are now just nicely, beautifully succulent. Your broccoli will also change in a bit of color, and your courgettes will actually start to soften and shrink in size. We are going to take a short break now, allowing us to allow for this to cook for about another 2 to 3 minutes, but don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just catching up, we are right about done with this very simple dish. But before I proceed, we are going to be making something more like a masala that will go with the fish. Remember, we also made some rice on the side, which is now fully cooked on the pot here. And now we're just about ready to take out our steamed vegetables. So as I'd mentioned before we went on a break, very handy to remember, if you have a strainer of this nature and you may have a pot that may sustain it but allow it to almost float over the pot, always gives an advantage to steam your vegetables. And also very handy, you can also throw a lid right over your vegetables, which will allow for it to trap up a bit more steam and also rush the process. So very simply, just take the lid out and using a cloth proceed to lift your strainer from the pot. Of course, always making sure to hold it right over, giving it a shake in case you have any liquid still in there. And proceed to move that to your board. And you can now discard the water. Now, very simply, we're going to proceed to move our vegetables onto our plate. So I'm just going to set those right on the plate there. You will be able to see the images very clearly from the cameras once I'm done. But as I mentioned, a nice, beautiful, healthy option to steaming vegetables that does not really need you to touch any water particularly. Saves you enough time as well, and also allows for you to really be able to lock in your nutrients, especially when working with vegetables. Now just to grab the last and final piece there. You can reserve the rest. So that is as simple as it is to steam your vegetables. Now we're just going to proceed to also place our fish on the plate. Simple as that. And now remember, for the last and final step, which was for the rice, we're just going to scoop that into a bowl, but very importantly, begin by breaking, or rather fluffing up your rice very shortly. And once done, begin by first discarding your clove of garlic and proceed to scoop your rice into a side plate of choice. Once that is done, we can just sit that in the front. And now for the process of the last and final process, just to finish this off, grab a fresh pan and proceed to heat. Remember, this will cook quite a little quick, so remember, this may not really actually require you to make this in advance, but as soon as you've got your fish ready, it's always just going to give it a nice, beautiful, refreshing flavor. So very simply, begin by oiling your pan, and to that we will incorporate about half of a medium-sized onion. So you can slice that halfway and reserve that on the side. And now very simply proceed to chop that very finely. Of course, always making sure to go right through the middle. finish off the big chunks by chopping them a little finer. And now once that is done, proceed to discard the root end and proceed to move your onions into your pan. And now next up, we're also going to incorporate our last and final ingredients, which is your tomatoes, bit of your paprika powder. Proceed also to chop in there about 1 small clove of garlic. You can chop that very, very coarsely. Add that to your pan. And just quickly toss that through, allowing your paprika and your onion to combine very, very quickly. Proceed to also slice a small chunk of your ginger, and you can throw that into your pan as well. And proceed to also chop in some fresh parsley. Add that to your pan. And now just simply toss everything together, just right up until you start to blister your tomatoes. And by blistering, this would basically be just at the point where the heat is right enough to allow the skin to pop. Very, very important to always remember to season as you go. So proceed to add some salt and crush in some black peppercorns. Toss that once more. And just using the same ramekin or small container that you had your paprika in, and that should be about a tablespoon of water. Add that to your pan and just proceed to toss those. And once that is done, it's just about ready to go onto your plate. So you can now turn off your heat completely and always begin by just moving your tomatoes off the way to begin with. And while the mixture is nice and hot, proceed to scoop that over your fish, making sure to always plate mostly at the center. That should allow also for your guests to be able to spread the mixture out on their own. And now proceed to add your cherry tomatoes right over the top. And you can proceed to add the rest right around the sides to your vegetables. And for the last pieces, those can go right over the top. And always very important to finish any fish dish, always have a bit of lemon reserved on the side. And you can just place that right on the side of your plate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my simple version of a dry fried tilapia with some steamed vegetables and some white rice. I hope you've managed to pick something today, and I hope you are going to be tempted to go out there and try making your whole fish as we did on the show today. One particular point, as I mentioned, to check for: always make sure your fish is fresh. Always make sure to check for those particular checkpoints, and you'll never go wrong with any fish at all. For any additional info that I may also add, you may also probably also talk to your fishmonger locally, or any particular place that you buy your fish. They should be able to give you a nice, beautiful breakdown of many other varieties of fish available out there. And with that said and done, we've come to the last and final part of the show. I am going to bid you farewell at this stage, and I'm just going to take my advantage now and dig into this beautiful dish. So until the next episode, God bless and see you soon.